data is the fuel for AI. AI cannot learn or train its algorithms without data. Well, where does this data come from? If we're not careful about where this data comes from, we could be having major privacy concerns or copyright concerns. All of these are different facets that show why ethics in AI matters and why when we do build AI systems, whether it's for organizations or governments, we really have to be ethically minded from the very beginning. Otherwise, we're going to be creating bigger problems down the road. When we talk about ethical AI, we're really talking about using AI ethically. And why ethics is actually really important when it comes to AI is because AI is at its heart all about automation. You're setting a program, an algorithm to do something autonomously. So when you do that, you really want to make sure that you begin with the end in mind. What are you having this program, this algorithm do? And a classic example of that is, there's a fun example we use in AI ethics of, imagine you have a company that produces paper clips. And so you program a machine, an AI machine, to basically come up with the best algorithm, the best way to make paper clips cheaply and quickly and effectively so that you can be the best paperclip manufacturer ever. Well, without any ethical guidelines, that algorithm will potentially deplete the earth of natural resources that are required for other things that are really important while making lots and lots and lots and lots of paper clips. It's like, well, okay, great. You've become the best paperclip maker ever, but at the same time, you've starved the earth of a natural resources that we really need to survive. That's kind of an exaggeration, but it does speak to the fact that when a human makes a mistake, the human makes a mistake once and we learn it, we go, whoops, and we fix it. When an AI makes a mistake, it does it 10,000, 100,000 times before anybody might notice. And then by that time, it's a real problem. So when we talk about ethical AI, we talk about making sure that these autonomous systems are built with ethics in mind. And a big component of that is AI right now is already being used in algorithms on social media. For example, you're browsing YouTube or Instagram. Well, that's how you're given content that you like. So as you're checking out content, the content that's suggested, whether it's through Netflix or Instagram or YouTube, is based on AI algorithms that say, oh, yeah, Mo likes this, let's give him more of that. Or if he liked this, then he'll like that. That's great because it does help us and it helps us discover content that we wouldn't otherwise have. But there's an ethical concern here of addiction because then you end up spending way more time on these platforms because the algorithms have just gotten so good at giving you what you need. Also, there are algorithms that are meant to, because they give you what you want and more of it, they essentially cause you to be a bigger consumer, whether that's of products or of media or what have you. So this is just, again, one example of where ethics and AI intersect and why we need to be ethical. Another example actually of ethics and AI is in regards to the algorithms themselves or the models themselves. When we train these models, they use vast amounts of electricity, for example. So you could be building these amazing AI models, but if they're using vast amounts of electricity, then we could be creating a sustainability problem for the environment. That's another part of ethical AI that we have to think about. Also, a big one when it comes to ethical AI is data, right? Data is the fuel for AI. AI cannot learn or train its algorithms without data. Well, where does this data come from? If we're not careful about where this data comes from, we could be having major privacy concerns or copyright concerns. All of these are different facets that show why ethics in AI matters and why when we do build AI systems, whether it's for organizations or governments, we really have to be ethically minded from the very beginning. Otherwise, we're going to be creating bigger problems down the road. Fairness, transparency, responsibility, these are all ethical AI principles. And actually at Bytewise, we created our own framework called the CLEAR framework for ethical AI responsibility or for using AI ethically. And this is what guides our AI development and our AI consulting and strategy for our clients. But essentially, in a nutshell, what we're talking about when we say, for example, transparency, we're talking about the transparency of the algorithms, how they are making their decisions, right? If we are training algorithms to do certain things, we want to make sure that we can peel back the curtain or look under the hood and say, okay, how is this AI algorithm actually working? Is it a profit-making engine? Is it really meant to exploit us? Or by making sure it's transparent, we can ensure that the algorithm has a goal or a purpose that is ethically rooted and is not something that is meant to take advantage. Another aspect is, for example, fairness. And when we talk about fairness, we mean that we don't want it to be biased. Because AI uses data to train, if that data is biased, there's a concept in AI, we call it trash in, trash out. If you feed it bad data, it's going to give you bad models, bad predictions. An example of that is when AI was trained, for example, to screen for skin cancer. If the data that you gave AI used predominantly white skins and not black, you'd end up getting a lot of false positives when you use those algorithms on different skin colors. Tesla, for example, with their self-driving cars, they have to be trained on how to avoid pedestrians and make sure that if they're going to hit somebody, to make sure they don't hit them. Well, again, if the training data is predominantly of a certain race, the algorithms, through no fault of their own, are going to be biased towards that race versus another. And so it can really create problems. This is what we talk about with fairness and bias. For example, if you take a look at a global map and see where most of the data for these AI algorithms comes from, it comes from mostly Western influences. So European countries, North America, you'll see a gigantic black, no data representation, for example, from Africa or the Middle East. So there is an inherent bias against those denominations and those countries. So this is when we talk about bias. That's another ethical problem with AI, is that the training data needs to be unbiased. Think of AI as a little kid that you're training or you're teaching it. What you teach it is really important. If you don't teach it these important principles of ensuring that we're not biased as we do whatever it is we're trying to do with AI, then it's going to learn from you and learn those biases and perpetuate those biases. Another aspect when it comes to AI is when we talk about responsibility. Who's responsible when AI fails? If AI makes a mistake, we have to make sure that we know who we hold accountable for that. Otherwise, we can introduce autonomous systems that go and do all these things, and then if they make mistakes, massive mistakes that can cause real problems for society or for the planet, and there's no responsibility behind it, well, oops, it was the algorithm's fault, then we're really going to create a lot more problems than we solve. And that's not what we want to use technology for. We want to make sure that technology continues to solve problems rather than create new ones. So when we talk about these aspects of ethics like transparency, responsibility, bias, fairness, these are all just some of the various aspects of ethical AI. And we can see how not adhering to those ethical principles can really create some problems later on. I like to speak on ethics as a whole generally without going into details, but I would encourage the audience to experiment with these tools, maybe ask it some of these ethical questions and see where it stands. And by seeing where it stands, they can then see the inherent bias in these systems already, right? This is not a bias that we're worried about happening. This is a bias that's already happening now. And it's one of the reasons why I have encouraged the use of building your own large language models and training them yourselves. Because then if you're using these models, then you are going to make sure that the data that it uses is unbiased. You're not using some other company's model that's trained with their biases, and then you're taking that and putting it into your workflows and then perpetuating those biases as well. So by building your own large language model, whether as an organization or as an individual, you can help mitigate some of these biases. The current conflict that's happening in the Middle East between Israel and its neighboring states, there's a lot of bias if you talk to ChatGPT about that or other models. You can actually have fun with some of these models. You can really explore the ethical aspects of it and trip them up and kind of hit their guardrails, so to speak. And when you do, you get some fun results. And I think that's more fun than me talking about some of the ethical aspects I've ran into when using some of these frontier models.